Oh, hi everyone. I've had quite a few messages asking if I can specify the certain colours that I'm using in my videos. There is a few reasons why I don't do that, and I'll list them in this video. I thought that I would just show a black and white tiger painting that I did this year, just purely to show that you can still get the same amount of realism, the same amount of detail, just working with two colours, which I know isn't exactly what the question was, because obviously you are going to need to know the colours for when you are working in a colour-based medium. However, unfortunately, the answer that no one really wants is it is just trial and error. It is the more you do it and the more you practice and the more you get used to working with the pencils, regardless if it's colour pencils, pastels, painting, anything like that. It is purely down to trial and error. So I believe that there are 20, 30, 40 ways to get to the same result, to get to the same end. It is very much like painting when you're working with pastels, in that you do have the ability to mix your colours. So regardless whether or not you're using pan pastels or the route that I go, I sand down some of my soft pastel sticks and then I blend them together on a bit of paper. You can go down that route, or you can blend the pencils themselves by working different layers on the pastel mat and blending them out that way. So that makes it difficult for me to list the colours that I am using, because quite often for the midtones and the base layers, I mix a lot of the colours from scratch on that separate bit of paper from various different colours, and quite often I will be mixing the colours and it isn't what I want. So I'll start again, I will work from scratch and I will mix something, and eventually you'll get to the colour that is more what you're aiming for. Another reason, and I do find this is a bit of a downside to pastel pencils, and the soft pastel sticks are just as difficult. The pastel pencils, they don't have the colours themselves, certainly not with the sets that I use, apart from the Caran, I believe. Certainly, let me just check that out. Yeah, they've got the colours, the actual name of the colours listed on the pencils, but the other ones that I've got, the Pitt pastel pencils and the Carbothello, they're just a set of numbers. Well, you'll know from using them that it doesn't take long for those numbers to wear away, and I have no idea what pencil I pick up. I'll have 60 in front of me sometimes, and I'll just go to pick up a pencil, I'll put it on the paper, and I'll think, no, it's not the right one, and I'll pick up another one. So the fact that the numbers wear away, it does make it difficult for me to even reference those in my video description, because I don't pay any attention to the numbers when I pick up the pencils. I literally just go, yep, that looks like the colour that I'm sort of after, let's give it a go. Another thing is, you could have the same set of colours that I am using, but if you layer them slightly differently, put a lighter colour on top of a darker colour and vice versa, the other way around, then especially with pastels, I find that you will still get a different colour depending on how you layer those set colours that you've got in your hand. So you may still be using similar colours to any other artist that they're using on the portrait, but unless you layer them exactly the same way, you could potentially still get a different result. So as I say, I am a strong believer in the knowing of the right colour, and I still don't get it right, but knowing of the right colour, because it comes with time, and the more you pick up the pencils and the more variance in subjects that you draw, you will naturally become more confident in having an eye for knowing what colour you might need. Like I say, I still don't know 100% when I go to do it. A really good example is when I upload my cheetah video. When I first worked on the adult cheetah, I was going from between various pencils, different brands, because I just couldn't find the right combination that I wanted for my layering process and how I wanted the colour to look. Once I did find the pencils that I was happy with, obviously you've then got that in your mind that you know what pencils you want, but that took me many attempts, and you'll see that in the video. I'll break that down and I'll slow that part down so you can see just how many pencils I used to try and narrow down what I wanted my end result to be. And as I say, it is absolutely achievable to achieve the same result just purely with pastel pencils. I'd say 90% of my portraits are done purely with pastel pencils. So it can certainly be done. I don't personally use pan pastels. I haven't used them yet. I may give them a go, but I just haven't used them. And the soft pastel sticks, I find they are really great, obviously, for larger areas, but I always tend to, as you know, because I work in smaller areas, I do tend to favour my pastel pencils. All of the information, or as much of the information here that I'm going to try and fit in this video, I have made a blog post on my website with this all written down. There's a couple of more colours that I have specifically listed for something like my recent video with Charlie on how to draw curly fur. I did list a couple of colours there, which, as I say, are over on a blog post on my website, which is linked in the description of this video. So if that is of interest, you know, head over to there and have a read of that, and that might be useful. So I decided to add this black and white tiger painting as the initial video for this one. I am going to then in a minute post a photo of two completely different reference photos of the same dog to show that the colour will be completely different depending on your light source. But for now, this video just shows that all I have is black and white. That's it. I use Liquitex Basics. I use generic paintbrushes, and this is on a canvas board, so you know, a canvas is obviously far more expensive, so this would be a great one to practice on. But if you then wanted to start introducing some more colours, you could then maybe try a sepia, add a burnt sienna to it, so you've got black, white, burnt sienna, and you could try and go down that route. But you can get a completely realistic portrait just working with black and white. It is more than achievable. When you do a point painting like this, it is all about your contrasts. Are your lights bright enough and are your darks dark enough? Like here, I changed from the reference photo quite a lot. There was a lot of artistic license that I wanted to make my artwork different. I added a really strong light source to the direction that the tiger was looking. And because of that, you have to therefore make the other side in shadow. So you have to get those darker areas dark and the lighter areas light. I could draw this tiger in lime green, purple, pink, and it would still look realistic. You would just assume it was under a pink light bulb, if you ever had a pink light bulb. You get what I'm saying? So it is more than, I personally, this is one of my favourite ways to work. I love working on black paper with colour pencils. I love working, there's a few pet portraits I've done in pastels with a black background. Love that. And as I say, this was an airbrushed background with my Createx airbrush paint with a bokeh background, which I used for a stencil, and then I painted this black and white tiger on top. So as I mentioned a bit earlier, it all depends on the light source. So the colours that you see from one photograph will vary considerably to the other depending on where the photo was taken, time of day, the surroundings. So this is my own dog, this is Roxy. The photo on the left was taken in an open field on an overcast and cloudy day. So you can see the image on the right was taken just as the sun was setting. We were in a woods, so the sun was coming through the trees. So it was a low, bright sunlight, and you can clearly see the difference between the colours in her fur on the left side and the right side. It is very, very different. I will mention in a little bit a tool, a handy tool that you can use if you are struggling to pinpoint a colour in your portrait. Now, that is good for identifying the fur that is closest to you, which is the fur that you would layer last, but it might not help you in terms of knowing what undertone, what undercolour to put in. So basically what I would do for this, and I'll explain this in more detail, is pick the colour that you want, and then you would go a couple of shades darker by darkening it with your mixing up, whether it's your soft pastels or your pan pastels, or adding a darker layer of your pastel pencils. And then going back with this, they call it an eyedropper tool, and then identifying that colour on top that you know then you've got to overlap onto the layer that you've just made darker. So for now, let's look at these photos. So if I was going to be drawing the photo on the left, you can see that her darks are still very dark. She's got a lot of black there, and I love using black. some people say, you know, not to use it, but I love using black, and I would layer other colours on top. So Roxy on the left, she's got a lot more blues, a lot more purples, and certainly the greyer, softer tones. So you would be layering those sets of colours on top to get that lighting correct for that photo. In the photo on the right, you can see her black tones do not look black. If anything, they look brown. And I can assure you she is a black and white staffy. So it is all about capturing the right lighting for the photo that you're working with. Now, there are times where I've been asked by various clients, they'll hand me and send me over some various photos of their animals, and they like the pose of one photo. So let's say they wanted something like Roxy, where she's smiling, she's got her mouth open, but she preferred the warmer colours of the photo on the right. You can use a photo editing software if you've got that to hand on your computer, and you can adjust the hue and the saturation to make those colours warmer. That is more than okay to do that. Send it back to the client, get them to confirm it, and then you've got something solid to work with, and you've got two various references to work from. There have been situations where I've got a photograph and it might not be the right quality that I need, because ideally I like to see the sort of quality that you've got in the left-hand photo here, where you can see the fur direction in Roxy, but it might not be possible to have that. But they've got another photo that does show more detail, but they wanted the pose of the other photo. I've done that, and I've used the fur direction, the detail in the eyes of the other photos, but used the previous one as the main pose and positioning of the portrait. It's also things in terms of choosing what colours. Look at the difference in the colour of Roxy's eyes. The one with the low bright sunlight has reflected so much of that brown, red, yellow ochre colour in her eye, with the strong blue highlights from that are reflecting from the sky and all that around her. And then that is much more dulled down in the photo on the left. That doesn't say the photo on the left is the one that I wouldn't use. It probably is the one that I would use, to be honest. I like how her expression is in it. But I certainly, if it was me, I would incorporate more of the colour from the right-hand photo and make her eyes on the left side that much more vibrant, because that's just how you might want to capture it. You might want to capture her eyes in that way. So this is the tool that I was talking about. This is called an eyedropper tool. You can, most photo editing software have it, but you can also download free apps on your tablet if that's what you use for your reference photos on your phone. And what it is it lets you hover over your image, and it will show up in a larger area, as you can see here, this square. It will show you that colour that you are hovering over. As I mentioned, it doesn't show you necessarily the colours behind it, but it does give you an indication as to what shade of that colour your undertones would be. So what I would recommend is hover over the colour in the area that you're struggling to know what your undertone needs to be, pinpoint that colour that's on top and go a couple of shades darker, mix something darker and apply that as your undertone. This is also really handy for helping you decide whether or not it's a cooler colour or a warmer colour, and depending on where that sits on the colour wheel. So it is a really handy tool for instances where you're not sure what colour that you should put down. So I would definitely recommend, if there is something that you struggle with, to download this or use it on your software. The more that you use tools like this and pick up pencils and start layering, mixing your undertones, it will become more like second nature. You will start to look at your reference photos knowing what colour selection you're going to need, which will obviously make things much easier, but it is just about drawing, picking up the pencils, practicing and becoming confident. The good thing with pastels, especially working on Pastelmat, you can put a wrong layer down. It doesn't really matter if you put the wrong colour down. You can layer on top of it. So there is nothing really that you can do on it that you're going to ruin. Don't be worried about making a mistake, because you learn from those mistakes and it's something you then won't repeat in a next portrait. If you are struggling with picking what colours you want, how to layer them down, one of the things that might be worthwhile doing is picking something and doing a focus project usually a rose is a good one to start with because you've got a set amount of colours. So it's, you know, let's say you've got a pink rose, a red rose, you know what selection of colours you're going to have in front of you, and it's just about learning which of those colours to layer to get the result that you want. It can then be obviously a bit more daunting if you've got a portrait in front of you and the dog's various colours. So if you pick something like a rose, narrow the colour selection down and get to grips with layering it into how you want the end result to be, then I think that's the best way to, one of the best ways to learn how to get confident in picking and layering your colours. The other thing is, if you draw the rose not quite right, it's not quite the right colour, you haven't got the petals in quite the right shape, no one's going to know because each rose looks different, each petal is a different shape, but it just will help to get your confidence, picking colours, layering colouring down, and if you make a mistake, it really doesn't matter. So after all of that, the biggest tip I can give you is make sure that regardless of the colour, your darks and your highlights are right and they're strong enough. You'll end up with a flat portrait, and that's worse than if you have the colour slightly wrong. So make sure that you have the contrast there, your brights bright enough, your darks dark enough. This painting of this tiger shows that I've put a really strong light source there. It looks just as realistic as if I was to do it in colour, and you learn your values. So in making sure your portrait is not flat is just as important as making sure that the colour is as close to what you can get to your reference photo. Right, I've rambled on enough, so I hope this video was useful. Again, pop any comments below if there's any suggestions for other videos you'd like me to make. And also don't forget, subscribe, hit the bell button so you get notifications of new content, and I will be uploading again next week. Bye!